Hey everyone, welcome to Meeple Bits. Thanks for joining me today. In today's how-to, we're going to tackle the game Rise to Nobility. I kickstarted this one when it first launched, and it took me a while to finally get through and get some plays in there, so this video's late, but I hope you enjoy. Rise to Nobility is a game for 1 to 6 players, so there is solo mode, and there is a 6-player mode with some additional setup requirements, which we're not going to address in this video. So we don't address solo, and we're not going to address the 6-player changes that are required. With a playtime of about 25 minutes per player, and that's pretty accurate, I would say. So join me, guys, as we dive into the setup how-to. We're going to take a couple of turns for this pretty heavy game, Rise to Nobility. So before we begin, let's take a quick look at the components that are going to come out during the course of play. Keep in mind that as we go through these components, yours might be different because I'm going to use the components from the deluxe version. To begin, we have character cards, as denoted by the stone chair background. Settler cards, as denoted by the sort of bag of everything background. Reference cards, to show you how each round and phase is played. Setup cards, depending on how many players you're going to have, the setup will change. Event cards, which are not standard, but can be used to enhance gameplay. We have a first player marker, a round marker, resource tokens in 6 different resources. So we've got our books, artwork, this one is magic, jewelry, furniture, and weaponry. You might have just square cubes. In the deluxe version, it's sort of more icon. In 6-player colors, we've got dice, buildings, meeples, reputation marker, nobility track marker, and victory point track marker. We've got a dice modifier token, money in 5 and 1 denomination, ship tiles, building tiles, which are dual-sided for a day and night variant, and stone council tiles. Here we have the player boards, which have the track for reputation around the sides. They've got 3 plots for community buildings, 7 plots to house settlers, and up top is where you would store all your different goods. Additionally, you've got your meeple platform for your workers that are waiting to be placed, and a housing platform for any settler buildings that are ready to be built. And lastly is the main play board. This also is dual-sided, with the other side having the variant for nighttime. Now, ignore these tiles for now. I've already sort of preset this up, but we're also going to dive into each of these sections on this main player board a little bit closer. Before you begin setup, first identify the player count, 1 through 6 players, keeping in mind that the game will change in setup based on the number of players you're going to have. In a 1 to 2 player game, or in a solo or 2-player mode, you're going to be putting building tiles into each of the middle section of the guilds. Whereas in a 6-player game, you must use an additional chancery board, which I will not be covering in this video. So for purposes of setup, we're going to use a 2-player setup for this game. Once you've identified the player count, as I mentioned in this 2-player setup, we're going to fill the second slot of each guild with a building tile from that guild. Once we've done that, separate the settler decks into 2 separate decks, 1 and 2. Then deal each player 1 card from the tier 1 settler deck, and then shuffle all remaining cards. Once all players have 1 settler from the tier 1 deck, draw 6 cards anywhere up near the top left area of the play board, close to the Cavern Tavern section of the game. So there's going to be a lot of cards off screen, but just know that there are 6 cards out there. Next, randomly take the Stone Council tiles and fill in each spot from left to right, going down the order. Once you've filled the entire Stone Council section, take all remaining tiles and put them in a pile next to the area. Once any of these are drawn, you'll fill them in between rounds. Then, take the draw bag. Fill it with all building tiles. Randomly shuffle and take and draw 6 building tiles down in the guild hall section. Now again, there's going to be some areas a little bit off screen, but what you would do is just sort of place them right there, hanging off the board just a little bit. And prepare the general supply. So a bit off the table, we're going to have an area to draw out all the different supplies where all players can reach. Lastly, take the ship tiles, shuffle them, draw 1 into the shipyard, and keep a draw pile next to the shipyard to reset each round. At this point in the game, you are going to want to determine who's going to go first, because in a 4, 5, or 6 player setup, each player that is not 1, 2, or 3 will receive a modifier token, where the 4th player is going to receive 1 modifier token, and the 5th player is going to receive 2 modifier tokens, and the 6th player would receive 3 modifier tokens. Now that we have the main play area set up for 2 players, again, if this were, say, a 3 or 4 player game, these building tiles would not be already placed into the second slot. This is only for a 1 or 2 player setup. So once you've got the main play area set up, then all players choose a color, and let's go ahead and set up their play area. To set up the play area, all players should receive a player board, and, as was previously drawn, their starting settler card. Keep in mind, this settler is just a part of their hand. This is not a developed settler or a corded settler. Then all players should choose their color. For this example, I guess I'll take yellow. So I'll take all dice in my color, all buildings, and all meeples. So buildings and meeples. Then each player should put 1 building, 1 house, onto their building platform. Next, all players should take the star token that they have and put that on the main play area on the right side on the Nobility track. Then all players should take in the deluxe version, this castle token and place this on the reputation track starting in the 9 position. And lastly, all players should take their sort of flag marker and put it in the 0 space of the victory point board, which again is another component off screen at the moment. Once all players are set up, randomly deal out 1 character card to each player. This character card is there, and you'll notice it additionally has a power. So once your person becomes a lord, which we'll cover in a moment, this activates once and only once for the game. Additionally, each player should receive 8 coins and 1 resource of each of the 6 types, putting the resources into each of the warehouses at the top of the player board. And then, of course, just to make sure that all players know what they're doing, go ahead and make sure that everyone has a reference card as well. Now that setup is complete, let's take a moment to look at the player board, the character card, and the settler cards, or rather, character cards, settler cards, a little bit closer. So on your player board, around the area of the player board on the outside is your reputation track. During the course of play, as you roll and draft dice to use, you can only use values equal to or less than your current reputation. So once rolling everyone starts at a 9, and so for example, I would only be able to say use this 6 and a 3, or maybe I wanted to use this 5, 3, and 1. Any variation that adds up to 9 or less is what is available. Additionally, resources are considered unlimited, so if necessary, use any modifier tokens. Any meeples that are waiting to be placed for apprenticeship would be sitting on this platform. Any houses that are ready to be built for settlers would be sitting here on this platform. There are 3 slots for community buildings, which are, which are these types of buildings here, which give you an additional victory point when completing settler cards. Additionally, when you cover up each of these, this flag marker here indicates victory points. The star icons indicate an increase on your nobility track. And the areas above each of these sections indicate when taking income, you're going to be able to receive the bonus above. So here you would receive 1 additional gold for income. Here you would go up the reputation track 1 when taking income if this slot were occupied. And this one would give you +1 modifier token when taking income. And on that note, let's go ahead and look a little bit closer at these cards. So these are the main cards to use in draft during the game. Here's my character card. This one in the upper left-hand corner indicates that he is of the furniture guild or apprenticeship. Down here, you'll see that once he reaches noble status, and I'll cover that in just a moment, but that relates to the nobility track on the main board. Once he reaches to become a lord, he would then take 3 goods of your choice. So any of the 6 goods, he would be able to choose 3 of. On your settler cards, in the upper right-hand corner indicates the reward. So this tier 1 settler would reward me with 2 meeples to place inside of guilds, inside of apprenticeships, things like that. The upper left area indicates the minimum and maximum number of goods to use and the amount of victory points you would receive. So for this one, I must contribute a minimum of 6 goods to receive at least 6 victory points to complete this settler card. But he'll never be worth more than 9 victory points by contributing a total of 9 goods. The goods that these settlers require to be courted to your township are indicated at the bottom. So this particular settler in the class of dwarves, and again there are humans, dwarfs, elves, halflings, trobits, and green elves. So there's 6 total classes, and that matters as well as it relates to the Stone Council on the main board. So these goods, you can contribute a maximum of 3 of each of these types of goods. So example, this dwarf, he wants weaponry, furniture, and books. So I would be able to, at minimum, I must contribute 1 of each and a maximum of 3 to reach my minimum of 6. So example, I could contribute, say, 3 furniture, 2 axe, and 1 book. That would reach the minimum requirement. To reach the maximum requirement, I could certainly put 3 of each resources, and then I would be able to reach the maximum of 9 victory points. Additionally, as I mentioned, you may only contribute a max of 3 of any resources to complete a settler card. However, depending on what your character card is, mine being furniture, and there are the 6 types, so of all the goods, there are the 6 types. This allows me to contribute a 4th good towards the completion of these settler cards. So example, I would still need to meet its requirement by having at least 1 of these, but I could say contribute 4 furniture, 1 and 1, to get my minimum of 6 for this settler card. So if this were, say, a blue icon for the magic, then he wouldn't apply, and this doesn't happen, but that would allow me to add a 4th magic resource to any settler cards. So that's how your character comes into play, and that's how the settlers operate. And then in order to complete a settler card, you must have a place to house them. So before completing this card, even if I had all the resources, if I did not have a house ready for that settler, I would need to get a house from the construction yard of the main play board, which we'll cover in just a moment. But everyone does start with one house. So if I were to complete this card, I would put it off to the side. I would immediately go up the victory points for the resources contributed, and I would put a house on any one of the 7 plots. There are 7 plots on your play board, and there are 7 houses for each player. So the maximum number of settler cards you can complete during the course of the game is, of course, 7. And before going through the rest of the game and how to play and taking your turns, let's take a deeper look at the main play board. On the main area, there are 6 guilds of each resource type around the edge. You've got Burke the Clerk's Office and the White Castle. In each location, there are 3 spots to place dice. In each of the areas, there are also 3 spots to construct buildings. On the far right side here is your nobility track. So here's where we've placed our markers in the 0 position. In order to activate your character's power, you must reach this purple shield, thus making him Lord status. Once you've reached the white shield, you're considered a White Lord. And then this also comes into play not only for your character card, but additionally what you qualify for down here in the lower right section, which is the Stone Council. On each of the Stone Council tiles, you'll notice there is a shield of white or sort of a crimson maroon, and you must be equal to that shield or greater than in order to qualify for these Stone Council tiles. In the upper left area of the board is the Cavern Tavern. Here, when you place dice, you would place them from left to right, and on the bottom it indicates the number of players where each slot is available. So once you place a die here, the next die must be greater than or equal to the previous die. And placing a die up here allows you to take another settler card into your hand. A player may have up to 3 settler cards in their hand at any time that have not yet been, corded, constructed, built, what have you. In the upper right of the player board is the construction yard. This is where you would pay 5 coins to get a house onto your player board. And opposite to the Cavern Tavern, in the construction yard, you would place the die from left to right, but the next die must be less than or equal to the previous die. So if placing a 6 here, then you could place a 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 here. If a player were to place a 1 out the gate in the far left position, then the next die and all subsequent die could only be values of 1. Here in the middle, the Burke the Clerk's Office, when you place and draft dice, and I guess let's go ahead and take a quick look at that. So when taking your turn, and I'll cover this more in detail, you're going to be able to place your die. Let's say I have this value of 3. I would be able to place it into only the middle slot of any of these spots on the board because they allow a die value of 3 or 4. Once placing it there, I would be able to do the action available. Here, it is purchasing up to 2 goods of this guild, which is furniture, at a cost of 1 per good. And that's the same for all guilds. If you were to go into the far right slot with, say, a 5 or a 6, you would be able to purchase up to 3 goods. So spend, say, 3 coins to buy up to 3 goods. Additionally, you'll be able to activate any of the buildings up here. So this building I could activate, and I would be able to take 1 coin. If I were to, say, come into this middle slot or this left slot with a 1, 2, 3, or 4, this additionally allows me to place a worker into the apprentice slot. So if I have any available workers on my player board, I would be able to put them into one of these slots. The available apprentice slots in any guild is equal to the player count. So in a 2-player game, only 2 slots are going to be available. So you could, once 2 slots are taken, no other players may put another one in a 2-player game. Same in a 4-player game. Once there are 4 apprentices, no one else could fill these slots. In the lower left is your shipyard. Here's where you're going to come and sell your goods for gold. This is pretty much the only way to acquire gold other than the bonuses throughout the game. But if you were to say put a 2 as your die value, that would allow you to sell up to 2 goods to the shipyard. Once you've sold a good to the shipyard, so example, jewelry here has a value of 3, but they're only willing to buy 1, so you would cover it up and leave it there until cleanup phase. Once this is taken, the next player would have no opportunity to sell jewelry for 3 gold. They could only sell then any slots that are left available. And over here is the round track, and once you've reached 10 rounds, after that 10th round, the game is over. And then lastly, down here in the guild hall, it's a little off screen, let me move it up here. Okay, cool. So down here in the guild hall, this is where you're going to be able to acquire buildings. In order to purchase a building, you must have a meeple, either A, in an apprentice slot of the type of building that you're purchasing, or have a meeple on your player board waiting to be used, and you're placing then this community building. These tiles, these community building tiles, go onto your player board. They do not go out here in the main play area. But like any other slot, you must place a meeple there. So example, let's say for a moment, this meeple were over here in the artist guild, and I came down here with a die value of 6. I would pay my 4 coins, purchase this building, placing it into the leftmost available slot, taking the reward, which on all guilds, the first slot is worth 5 victory points and 3 nobility points. In a 2-player game, we've already covered this middle slot, so this middle guild or building will never have an owner, but its reward is 4 and 2, and lastly, the third building placed is worth 3 victory points and 1 nobility. So once you were to say place this here, you would then take your apprentice and put him into that building, and he becomes a guild master. Then anytime this building is activated, you would receive the bonus above, and during the income phase, you would additionally receive any bonuses above. But you cannot purchase a building, because you cannot store these building tiles, unless you have an apprentice in a guild where that building applies. And then lastly, here in the White Castle, you can at any time place a 1 or 2 to move up your player board's reputation track by 1. 3 or 4 gives you a +2, and a 5 or 6 gives you +3. So if I were to say spend this die of 6 here, it would allow me to move up the reputation of my player board by that value, which is again your castle around the area. Additionally, in a 2-player game, something to remember, and this is also on the setup card. So you're only going to be able to have 1 die at any time in any area of the board or in any of the guilds. The exceptions are the Stone Council, the Shipyard, the Cavern Tavern, and the Construction Yard up off or there. But any of the guilds and the castle and the clerk's office in the center, you may only ever have 1 player on those slots. It changes in a 3, 4, 5, or 6-player game, making these slots more available. But please, again, reference the setup card for that. So you'll notice here on this one, it says only 1 of 3 dice slot in each guild is available. After a player places a die on one of the slots, the other 2 slots are unavailable until the next round. So once a player comes here, the next player would basically be blocked out of this Merchant's Guild. So that's everything for setup. Let's go ahead and dive in to, I guess, how to play the game, what you're doing in your turn, and then what are the victory conditions. So how's the game played? The game is played over the course of 10 rounds, with each round having 4 phases. To begin, phase 1 is rolling the dice. All players are going to take all 5 dice and roll them. Once all players have that ready to go, then you're going to start phase 2, which is taking actions. Once all players have taken their available actions, which are placing their dice, as many as they're able to or want to, then you're going to go into phase 3, which is income. During the income phase, you're going to take in a couple of parts. One, if you have any apprentices in any guilds, then you're going to take in a 2-player game, and again, reference your setup card in a 2-player game. If there is only, let me grab a meeple. If there is only 1 apprentice in a guild, you receive 3 gold for that apprentice. So for each guild that has only 1 person, that player would receive 3 gold. If there were 2 meeple in an area, so in this first example, each player would receive 2 gold per meeple in that area. So in this one, yellow player would receive 4 gold for this. Alternatively, if this were, say, the guild on the income phase, then yellow and red player would each receive 2 gold. And that's going to apply for all available guilds. Then additionally, I'll just pretend for a moment that I were the owner of this guild. If you were the owner of a guild during the income phase, 2 things happen. One, you'll take 1 resource of that guild, and then 4 is the upkeep. You're going to reset for the next round. So you're going to clear all the dice. You're going to remove anything that was sold to the shipyard, replace it with a new tile. You're going to then take any of the guild hall area. So let's say this tile were taken. You would move everything down, randomly draw the next tile from the bag. If there were any spots to fill inside the stone council, you would fill them in from upper left to lower right. So fill them in exactly like that. And then prepare for the next one, which of course is rolling the dice. So once, again, going back in through those phases of each round, then once the round is over, you would move the round marker up to the next spot after the upkeep phase, and then you're good to go. So going back to that action phase, that round 2. So let's go ahead and do this in a little bit of real time. So let's roll the dice. And you know what? Let me put this just kind of up here for now, just so you guys can see my player board as well, just sort of what's happening here. So once I've got my dice ready to go, all players would roll those dice. Then when taking actions, on your turn, you can do any of these things on your turn, which is placing a die, completing a settler card. So here's my settler card. So I would be able to complete a settler card and sell a building. Selling a building, so let's say, for example, I did have this building out here. I would be able to sell this building if I wanted, placing this meeple back into the spot here, taking 3 coins for selling it, but I would lose the 5 victory points and the 3 nobility, which was the bonus that I received for having that guild. Okay, so that's what you can do on your turn. All players, once I place, say, a die, let me just put this die here. Once I did that, and I didn't, say, do a settler card, then the next player would take their turn. They would do the same thing, and then it would come back around to me. Mind you, I can do value of dice up to 9. So if I placed a 2, then I still have 7 available. And I've got no easy 7 on my roll here, but that's no big deal. Anytime you go increase your reputation, those points become available immediately. So example, if I were to say, let's move this over here. Oh man, no real good spot for this guy. But let's say I were to put a value of 6 here in the White Castle. I would immediately move up 1, 2, 3, giving me 12 available. Then you'll notice I only have 8 out there. So I actually would be able to use still an additional 4 before the round is over. Just to kind of give you guys an idea. So those actions can be performed in any order. I could say complete a settler card, sell a building, and then place my die if I so chose. So anyway, I've got my dice roll here. I've got my things ready to go. So what would happen on my turn? Let's say, for example, I put a 4 here. This would allow me to buy up to 2 of the furniture and place 1 worker into an apprentice spot. So I could activate this building. The order of operations is actually activate buildings from left to right, purchase any goods, place any apprentices, and then do anything additional that might have triggered. So, example, let's say this building were here, and I put my die right here. So let's just assume. So I would go here, I would activate from left to right. The icon of this die says that I can swap 1 resource for another resource. So if I wanted to, say, get rid of this book for something else, I could do that. If I wanted to do anything like that, I could. I could choose to activate this or not. Example, if red, say, were the owner of that building, if I were to activate this by swapping a resource, red would actually receive 1 coin. Then I would activate this building. Well, since no one owns it, no reason not to activate it, so I would take 1 coin. And no one would get the bonus above. Then I would take, say, 2 additional coins, buy my max 2 resources, and if I had a worker, which I do not, but if I did, then I would be able to put them into this guild as an apprentice. Then the red player would take their turn. Now, red player would not be able to come into the Carpenter's Guild, because in a 2-player game, only 1 person at a time. So they would put their person, let's say here, activate, purchase, and then do anything additional. And then it would come back to the next player. All right, so resetting that. All right, so on my turn, I've placed this 4. I would like to spend 2 coins to buy 2 furniture. Okay, so let's put these furniture onto my player board. These chairs are a little bit tricky in the deluxe version. There we go. And then my settler card, he wants chairs, weaponry, and books. So you know what? I am going to go ahead and complete this settler card. So to do so on my turn, I would need to spend a minimum of 6 resources. I do already have a house available because this was given to all players to start the game. So I would take 3 chairs. That's 3. Ooh, I don't have enough. I am 1 short. Oh, shoot. Okay. Then I would actually have to wait till next turn. So I'm not going to be able to do that this turn. So the red player would take their turn. And as I mentioned, they'll put their die of 2 here. They would buy 1 book, and so on. Now it's back to my turn. I've already spent, put that back to 9. I've already spent a 4, so I only have a value of 5 left. So this 6 die could not be used. So you know what? I'm going to go ahead and use this 2, and I'm going to go here, because I do want 1 more resource, and this will allow me to buy that 1 resource. So I am going to buy for 1 coin that additional weapon, putting it into my my resource area, like so. Now I'm going to complete my settler card. So I've got 3 furniture, 2 weapon, and 1 book. So return that back to the supply. And this settler card has been created. I'm going to take my available house and put it on any one of these 7 land plots here. I'm just going to start in the upper left. Okay. This settlers is then complete, and then I've contributed a total of 6 victory points towards it. So I would move up the victory point track, which is off screen over there, up to the value of 6. Then I would take 2 meeple into my supply and put them right here, and they are waiting for work, waiting for placement. So right now I've got a total of 6 complete, so I have a value of 3 remaining. So the next player would take their turn. Let's say they took this number 4 die, put it down here. they would activate any buildings, and so this one gets activated, and they would receive 1 jewelry resource for free. So of course they would certainly take that, especially since no player has ownership of this building in a 2-player game. So they would do that, then they would buy, say, 2 resources. Now they haven't yet completed a settler card, so they don't have any workers to be placed. So then it would come back to the next player, and I'm going to take this value of 2, and I am going to, down here, let's put it into the Artist Guild. Nothing to activate because it activates left to right, and I'm not in an available slot to activate this one. So I would just say buy my 1 available resource for the 1 coin. Okay. And you'll notice now it also lets me place up to 2 workers. So you know what? I am going to take both my workers and put them, oh, this guy actually wasn't there. I'm going to put them into the Artist Guild, thus securing my position for any future activity. Then red player's going to take their turn. Let's say they place it somewhere, and they did that. Now we're going to move into the income phase. So I'm going to receive income equal to, everyone's going to receive income equal to the apprentices in all guilds. So I've got 2 apprentices here. That's 2 4 coins. I would take 4 coins into my supply. Next, if there were any guild owners, they would receive 1 bonus resource for each of these locations. And then let me just take a quick step back. Sorry. Additionally, when coming into a guild, if you already have apprentices, now I didn't at the time, but if I had apprentices and I were to say place this die into that artist guild and I purchased a resource, that allows me to get 1 free resource equal to the number of apprentices I have in that guild. So here, I actually would have been able, if I had these guys already there, but on a subsequent turn, if I do come here, I'll be able to take 2 free resource as long as I purchase 1 from this guild. So back to income. We've taken all of our stuff for the gold for the apprentices, resources if we had any guild masters, which an apprentice here, if he were on a tile, would be a guild master. If I had any community buildings, I would activate any bonuses that I had above it. And then I'm going to move into upkeep. So all players are going to take back their dice. No tiles were taken from the Stone Council or down here, so there's nothing to replace. Same thing up here. In the Cavern Tavern, if you take a card from the Cavern Tavern, you immediately replace it. So those will have already been done. Down here, if there were any goods sold, we would return those to the supply, replace it with a new ship that has come to port. And then we are going to advance the round marker into round 2. Once upkeep is complete, we're now back to phase 1, which is preparation, which is all players rolling their dice. And the game will continue until 10 rounds have been played. At the end of 10 rounds, the player who has amassed the most victory points through through building buildings, through completing settler cards, through completing Stone Council tiles, any availability of getting victory points, the player with the most victory points is the winner. So for endgame scoring, as I mentioned, you're going to take most of the points from your settler cards during the course of play, the bottom number for minimum, the top number for maximum. You can contribute, let's say for this guy who was 6 and 9, I could contribute, say, 7 total resources and get 7 victory points, but these are your immediate ones. For the end game, wherever you are on the nobility track, you're going to add those victory points to your score. So let's say I were in this slot here, that's 4 additional victory points. So I would add that to my final score. And then lastly, every 2 resources, doesn't matter which one, so I could just every 2 resources counts for an additional victory point at the end of the game. So most of your scoring is going to happen immediately during the course of play. Those are going to be your kind of end game, which is your nobility track and any leftover resources. Money is worthless at the end of the game. And I guess then lastly are going to be the modifier tokens. On your turn, if you have any modifier tokens, you can use that modifier token to move the die up or down one value. So if I could move this 1 up to a 2, but I could not wrap it around and turn it to a 6. And the same thing, I could not turn a 6 into a 1. So I could turn this 1 into a 2, or let's say I could turn this 4 either into a 5 or a 3. One modifier token per one movement. I could apply, say, 3 of them if I needed to modify it by 3 values. And that's how you activate the modifier tokens. And then additionally, as I mentioned, if I were to reach the purple shield on the victory or on the nobility track, then I would take 3 goods. This only activates once for the entire game. And I guess the last piece that we didn't really cover would have been this spot of your player board, which has a value of 5 or a 6. By putting a value of 5 or 6 in this spot, it does count towards the value of dice being used on your player board, but this allows you to return 1 worker to your player board. So I could take from the Artist Guild and bring a worker back here to be placed elsewhere in the future. This could not be taken back from a guild master. The only way to get a guild master back is to sell its building. So that's everything. There are some nuances if you are going to play with the event cards, which are these. They got these kind of backs 1 and 2. We're not going to cover that in this video. And for the 6th player is the Chancery board. Again, we're not going to cover that in this video, but if you guys want me to, leave a comment down below, and I will do an extended video, not only of playthrough, but for that additional setup for the higher player count with the events and with the Chancery board. So I'm going to go ahead and tear everything down now, guys, and stay tuned, and I'll bring you my afterthoughts. Hey everyone, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that setup and how-to for the game Rise to Nobility. Lot going on in that one, I know. So if you've made it this far, or if you're coming here just for the review portion, let's go ahead and jump right in. Rise to Nobility is not a light game at all. There is a lot of moving components, little things happening. So make sure, guys, whether it's your first playthrough or your 10th one, keep the rulebook handy, keep those reference cards handy, because you'll probably find yourself needing to make sure that you address these little things. And great job, there is an FAQ on the back of the book for those potentially overlooked things. So the components. So this is the deluxe version. So this one might be different than what you got. So I can only address the components of the deluxe, which are really good. I was very happy to kickstart the deluxe version of this game because, you know, all too often I'd find myself just wanting those more premium components in most games. So for the most part, they did a good job. But when it comes to the resource tokens, I don't know. There's just too little area to house all your potential resources, especially the furniture. The furnitures do not stack very well. Otherwise, the components are all really well done. Cards have a great linen finish. The board is beautiful in its art. The dice are nice weighted. But the deluxe version dice, they're, I don't know, too fancy, too bougie. I don't know. There's just something a little bit off about them. The readability of the numbers is a little bit tricky. Not that it's impossible or difficult, but at a glance, it's like, oh, that's a weird font that they went with. The coins are heavy and sturdy and metal, and that's probably my favorite part about the deluxe version is those coins. But the modifier tokens and a couple of the other things were just standard punch board. Not sure why they went that route with that. They could have done maybe something a little bit differently, but who's to say? Otherwise, components, deluxe version, really, really good. What do I like about this one? There's a lot to like about Rise to Nobility. It's a deep game. There's a lot going on. So, if you like worker placement like me, I definitely enjoyed this one. I did not enjoy. I liked it a little bit at 2-player, but this is not one that I would break out for a 2-player game. Namely because the initial setup, it's pretty inundating. There's a lot to it to get everything going on the board. So by the time you're finished setting it up, you could have probably played an equally deep 2-player game. And had just as much fun. On the higher play counts, it is really good though. You're taking your turns. You're able to kind of block people off. You're able to make sure that you can lock certain guilds up, which is really cool. So there's some good strategy involved there. I guess. Oh man, I guess though where it really draws back for me though is that the end game scoring is almost pointless because pretty much a player that you see in the lead mid game is the player winning the game. There's no surprise. No amount of resource stockpile or nobility track victory points are going to usually catch you up, because guess what? If that player managed to build or hire settlers and get those completed, they're going to advance equally as much on that nobility victory point as well. So my biggest gripe, I guess, about the game is that there's no mystery as to who's going to end up winning. So once you're heading into that 6th round, if it's a close game, sure, but if there's any real disparity in the scoring, it's game over. So by the time you're heading into that later round or those final couple of rounds, if someone's already ran off with it, there's just no catching up. Unlike other types of games where, again, there's some secret things going on that could really make a difference. Not so much here. But that's okay. It didn't really take away from the fun factor of the game, just a little discouraging when you already blatantly know who's going to likely win the game. Why should you add this to your collection? If you enjoy worker placement games like me, this is a really good game to add to your collection. It is heavier than a lot of the games that I do own, but not in a bad way. Sometimes I really do like to bring out those games. It's not overly complex for new players, I found, but I did notice that it took maybe one playthrough just to kind of get someone new up to speed. Otherwise, after that, it is pretty smooth sailing. So even though it's a deep game and complex, it's not so much so that it's not user-friendly for a new player at the table. Why is this a game you may not want to add to your collection? Setup time is, again, it's abysmal. I mean, I think it takes a good 20 minutes just to set the thing up. And two, for that other reason I had mentioned, there's no secret to who's probably winning the game. And that can be discouraging to the fun factor. Because look, if I'm playing a game and I already just see that I'm just blown out of the water and there's no chance of catching up, I don't know. Sometimes it's like, do I really want to sit and play through this this ass kicking? So if you like victory point games where, again, you've got some end game factors that can really close the gap in some areas, then this isn't going to be for you. So I guess that's going to do it for me on this one, guys. As I mentioned, if you want me to do a more advanced one playthrough and two address the 6-player setup and what that Chancery board is all about, as well as the event cards, please leave a comment down below. I'll try to tackle that as well. If you have any questions or comments about the game, happy to help out as best that I can. Again, leave a comment below. If you've enjoyed the content, I do really appreciate the support of everyone, guys. So feel free to leave a like and subscribe. And as always, until next time, thanks so much for watching.